Hi, Richard. Welcome. Thank you for being on the call.
Thank you, Karina. Appreciate it.
So, for those of you that are new to Quantum Touch, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about Richard and how he's recognized as one of the pioneers in the field of energy healing. And today, Richard founded Quantum Touch. He's an internationally acclaimed speaker at conferences, medical centers, chiropractic colleges, and holistic health institutes. And Richard's been on the faculty for the Heartwood Institute and the Holistic Health Institute. And amazingly, today, over 150 instructors teach Quantum Touch around the world, both in person and online. And the workshops are held in many different languages, including Chinese, French, Arabic, many different languages from across the world. And so our purpose as instructors, I'm a Quantum Touch instructor and have been since 2007, is to teach and to promote the Quantum Touch techniques in a way to inspire people to really discover the extraordinary healing power of love and of energy healing and of the techniques that make Quantum Touch such a fascinating modality. For the people that are new to Quantum Touch, and even people who know about it, just as a reminder, what was it like when you first discovered it, but also that first moment of, wow, did that really just happen?
Yeah, I first discovered it back in 1978. That would be 44 years ago now, if my math is relatively good. And my first book, called Your Healing Hands, was 3 months from publication. I mean, 3 months from being in print. And I went to this workshop and I meet all these amazing people are all excited to learn something. And there's this blasé grandpa who's very large and bored seeming. And he tells these crazy tall tales. And I don't believe a word he says about anything. He says, and I don't know if you heard this, but this is what he sounded like. He said, well, there was a time that I dissolved a tumor the size of a grapefruit in 1 hour. And then there was the time that the child broke his leg and you could see the bone coming out. And when I ran the energy in, the bone fused again. And then he could walk comfortably the next day. And then there was the time, and he goes telling these crazy tall tales. And I can't accept any of it. Then he said, oh yeah, I just touch people, the bones move back into alignment. So my girlfriend gets up in the front of the room. We're all looking at the big scoliosis S curve in her back, this big curve. And he says, well, I touched the hips, and they just rolled back to alignment. And I'm sitting 4.5, 5 feet away from her. My jaw's on the floor. Then he touches the occipital ridge and the bones move back. And then he goes up and down her spine slowly. And he's doing this deep breathing, like he's really working. And then within 10 minutes or 8 minutes, her spine was maybe at least 50, 60% straightened out. And I thought, this guy has a rare gift. I'm never going to learn it. And no one else will either. But in the course of the day, I saw that I could move the hips and the occipital bone, which has actually become sort of my trademark, because of all the thousands of kinds of healing that can happen, I find that one very entertaining, because it seems to be physiologically impossible. And then, as we'll get to later, through a series of discoveries, I found out that I could do it without touching. And then I found out I could do it faster without touching. And then I found out the latest, I don't even know if you know this, now in order to cause the hips and the cranial bones to spontaneously align, I wave my finger and say boing. And that's it. It takes 1 second, less than a second, boing, and the people are straightened out. I did it about 20 minutes ago at a cafe I was at. What's exciting is that ordinary people can learn these basic skills to help other people accelerate their own self-healing mechanisms. So the definition of a healer is important, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. A healer is someone who was sick and got well. A great healer was someone very sick who got well quickly, because we're not actually healing them. we're holding a field of this life force energy that we like to call chi or ki or prana or mana or whatever words they use for it. It's this animating current of life that flows through us. And by holding a field of the energy for another person, their body and spiritual intelligence uses that energy to match the energy of the practitioner. The practitioner never gets drained or tired doing it if you do it well. Just keep the breathing and body awareness moving. There's no belief system we ask people to accept. There's no badges of honor that we give people. It's just a real basic human ability. But when they match your vibration, their body and spiritual intelligence does its own healing. That's why we like to say the healer was the one who was sick and got well, and a great healer was very sick and got well quickly. We are just holding the resonance. So we can think of ourselves as resonant physicians, that we just hold the space for someone else to do their own self-healing, which removes the ego from the mix. I'm a healer. Well, I'm a great healer. Well, I'm a master healer. Well, I'm a 3rd degree. No, I'm a 10th degree master with a black belt in sensitivity training. So we don't give ourselves those badges, but what we do instead is we learn how to raise our own energy field, which does self-healing in the process. And I'm convinced it slows down the aging process as well.
Well, you look fantastic, and I think it does too. I think when you're bringing that much breath and focusing so much vitality through you, it's got to.
Well, consider this. If it's doing that much healing on somebody else and it has to go through you first, you're doing healing on yourself. Now, I'm 74. My trainer, before I came down here to Mexico, had me doing as many as 140 push-ups in one training session. And I have no pain in my body. I'm on no medications. And I don't know my age. And I don't know that I'm not in my 30s or 20s or 40s, because I'll just sprint down the street if I feel like it. I don't feel any limitation in my body whatsoever. So it's another kind of advertisement. You might want to learn about this, because it does increase your own vitality levels on a very significant way.
That's amazing. So I'm curious, do you have any particular routine of your day that for your wellness practices, or is it just decades of running energy?
I think one of the things that I encourage people to do, and everybody listening to this can apply this immediately, is build your health regime. In other words, you know something you're not doing that would be better for you than what you are doing. So don't make a big change, because if you try to change 60% of your life, and I'm going to eat this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to work out, don't even think about that. What I would suggest is, if you try to change too quickly, the microbiome in your gut freaks out. You're not going to be able to keep up the new habits. It's a waste of time. What I would recommend, however, is if there's one thing this week that you could change for the rest of your life. Oh, I'll never eat those cookies again. Okay, I'm going to start doing a little bit more of this, or I'll add this one little supplement. I'll take vitamin D3. That's it. That'll make me feel better. And so if you make one little change every week, a little 2% change, by the end of the year, you're 100% different. And so if you can just make these very small incremental changes whenever you think about it, oh, this is an easy one. I'll just stop eating this vegetable oil stuff. I can find some other oil, some olive oil or butter or something else that would be much better for me. Oh, that stuff causes inflammation on every cell. I get it. So I'll just make this little shift. Just never have vegetable oil again. It's easy. I'll just make that choice. If you keep making these little tiny choices, after a number of years, you're in a completely different space than you were before. And on the same level, if you say, what am I wanting to learn now? How am I wanting to grow? Oh, I'll learn how to do this healing method, or I'll learn this new language, or I'll learn how to play. Like, I just took a keyboard about 3 years ago, and I'm composing almost, I think that's something I am doing, is composing every day. Just make up 30-second, 1 minute. Don't have to put words to it, but just it's like a sound poem. And it soothes some part of me to be creative and inventive on a regular basis.
Wow, that's incredible. And all of that ties in with what we learn in the level 1 of focus on what you love, do what you love, and bring the energy of that into the session. And so you're doing that energetically and in real time as well.
I think it's really important that you follow your bliss in a self-actualized way. Doesn't mean suppress your emotions, but it means be responsible and find the thing that you're passionate about, give your energy to it. And what I think about quantum touch in that regard is that if you ever felt like you wanted to do healing on yourself, or if you ever wished you weren't helpless when your loved ones need some kind of pain relief or healing, it's an essential human ability that's been pushed aside, promoted that it couldn't possibly exist by Western culture. But if you can learn to do something that's really important and useful, even if you don't want to be a practitioner or instructor, it's in your back pocket. Like, you know how to ride a bicycle. You're not going to forget how to do that, but it's always there when you have it. And that's why I think this work is so significant, not just that it changes our understandings of physics and medicine and cosmology, but because it's so practical. It's such a basic human ability that should be taught in every school, researched at every university, and practiced in every medical institution, because it's fundamental to who and what we are and what we can do.
Absolutely. And one of the questions that people say is, people ask a lot in the workshops, how long does a healing take? And then I love to refer back to the story about Teddy, because just, for me, that story of just stay with it. And then it's cumulative. And I wondered if you'd be happy to share that story.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I thought about that, but that's a really good, important one. There was this little boy who was born to a mother who was completely irresponsible. She got almost all her calories during pregnancy from alcohol, and she was also addicted to amphetamines. And when the baby was born 13 weeks prematurely, he was so small and fragile, he couldn't even cry. He couldn't move his arms and legs. So the woman who took him home asked the judge, "Can I care for this baby?" And the judge said, "Well, you'll do a better job than an institution." Yeah. She and her husband were both quantum touch instructors. And so they took the baby home, and they're just running energy into the baby every day. And then the father, Terry, what he would do is in the morning, when the baby got strong enough to cry, the baby would start to cry in the morning, he'd pick up the baby and he'd run energy into the baby. And the baby had his energy needs met, and then he didn't have to cry, and he could wait patiently for the food, because the energy was more important to him than the food. Imagine that. Then he grew up to be average height and weight. He grew up to have above average intelligence. The prognosis of this child was lifelong institutionalization, a 20 to 40 IQ. And here he is, the center of love in the nursery school. And he took to drumming because he was like half American Indian, and nobody told him, but he just took to drumming, and he became the center of love. And amazingly, one day he was bouncing around on the couch like I used to do, my knees bouncing around, but he ended up hitting his head on the wooden part of the couch. And it really hurt a lot. So he's crying, and Dad comes over and starts running energy using quantum touch into his head. And very quickly, it stopped hurting. And Teddy said, "That feels good." He said, "Well, it's supposed to feel good." And then he saw Teddy doing this with his hands. And he said, what do you see? He said, I see light. He said, what's it look like? He said, it looks like flashlight. And so he could see energy. So his mom tested Teddy. Remember, I taught the chakra techniques where you meditate on the chakra and the color coming out your hand is the color of that chakra. So his mother ran the test on him and said, what color is this? And he said, that's yellow. What color is this? Well, that's blue. What color is this? That's green. And so she checked and he could actually see the auric colors. So the thing is we don't know the limits of what healing is. And by providing this new energy, it's like a gift of love. Consider, if you stroke your own arm, it's not that interesting. But if somebody you love is stroking your arm, oh, that's very interesting. That feels wonderful. Oh, I could just melt in that, okay? Someone else's energy is a surprise to your system. You can run energy on yourself, and often people can do amazing healing if they need it by running energy in themselves. Not always as well as somebody else, but often well. But when someone else's energy comes into your system, it's a surprise. And then the body can respond very, very quickly to that surprise.
Amazing. And how Teddy, the thing I love about that story is that the parents just kept on giving and giving and giving the love. There was no point that they stopped and said, okay, well,
That's
there
enough.
hasn't been, that's enough, there's no point, that they said that, and they kept with it. And then several years later, you have this boy that's able to take part in life in a way that he wasn't diagnosed to.
Well, consider this. Say you married somebody, and after 2 or 3 years, they say, well, I've given you enough love, I'm done. Well, that's crazy, because we're never done loving each other. As long as we have each other, we continue loving each other, and this is a beautiful way of expressing the love. One of the things about the quantum touch work is I think it kind of taps people into what I'll call their angelic self. In other words, we know about love, that a husband for a wife, or a mother to a child, or a grandchild to a grandparent, or vice versa. But what about just loving for the sake of loving without an agenda? It doesn't have to be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be a stranger. And you just get into the space where you connect to your love, and you're breathing, and you're feeling your body, and you're moving awareness through your body in different patterns, in different ways, and you're just holding the space of love without any agenda whatsoever. That's actually good for us to do. It puts us into a really wonderful space. And the world has forgotten to a large extent that you can just be in a space of love without an agenda. So I called it an angelic space, but it's not like you have to be special. You know how to do it. Everybody knows how to do it. You just don't have an occasion to do it. When was the last time you sat with a friend over a cup of tea and you say, well, I'm just going to love you for 30 minutes? It doesn't happen. But with quantum touch, you can get into that space for 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a quarter. Now, you can do a session. I mean, I was working with the men's basketball team at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And some of the sessions were as short as 2 minutes, and some were as long as an hour and a quarter. But the 2-minute sessions, they jammed their finger, they couldn't play. So 2 minutes later, it feels really good, and I'm getting back on the court. What we saw was that an average 10-minute session brought their pain down by 50%. And we've got it written up online if anybody wants to see the signed paperwork of the basketball players. Even one of the pages has a footprint on it because the guy stepped on the page. And you can actually see his footprint. And the coach signed off on all the sessions and said in his long career, he's never seen anything to compare with this. And whether it was a sprained ankle or a jammed finger, the work is so powerful and it happens so quickly. People familiar with these kinds of injuries are dumbfounded. Now, I did have 2 of my students approach me, and they told me the same story, but differently. One said there's a professional baseball team secretly using quantum touch, but they'll never admit it because it's their secret weapon. It helps the players get back on the field sooner. And there's a professional American football team using quantum touch, but they'll never admit it either. And so we can't get any free publicity from this because they don't want the other teams to know. It's their secret that keeps them healthier, fast, getting well faster. But
that doesn't surprise me.
It is being utilized, but it's unfortunately still too much of a secret for most of the world because they don't even know this exists.
That's right. That's right. And this state of love that you're talking about is scientifically proven to be physiologically beneficial. And I'm just wondering, when you're in that state, would you say that's the place you've been in when you've got your biggest insights of how to work with energy?
I don't know. The insights just kind of sneak up on me from time to time. I'm so hungry to have the next major discovery. Each one of my 5 books is based on a major discovery. And the 6th book has been in process. Henry Virgil is working on it. It's Self-Created Health. That's the 6th one. But I had a spiritual teacher back in 1980 who I didn't tell them anything but my name, my age, and where I called from. And they told me that they saw me writing 10 significant books in this lifetime, and a documentary, and a science fiction movie. Well, the 6th book is in process with Henry working on it. I'm making a documentary now, which will come out next year, called The Galileo Project, with Betsy Chassey, who was the one who made the movie What the Bleep. And I'm only in it for about 4 or 5% of the time because we have all these other amazing luminaries. And the whole theme of it is a post-material science. Science assumes that everything real will be explained with math, physics, and logic. But there are things like quantum touch that cannot be explained with math, physics, and logic. So one of the scenes in the documentary, I thought, how can I possibly show energy healing in a documentary? Because you can always hire actors who will say whatever you pay them to say. And there's faith healers and people who will believe anything. So what we did was we got parents who had twin daughters who couldn't go to sleep. And they're 1 year old. While I'm explaining to them, the daughters are going, they're just constantly whining because they're so uncomfortable because they can't sleep. And while I'm explaining, father picks up one of the daughters, starts doing the quantum touch work. And within seconds, the baby's just out. As I'm saying, sometimes if I can't even see them because I'm on like a Zoom call type of thing. And I said, sometimes the babies go to sleep so hard that it looks like they're just dead to the world, and the baby's just dead. And the other one falls asleep immediately after, and the parents are like, oh my God, we can't believe that it just worked. And then they interviewed them 2 or 3 months later. They said, every night at nap time, the babies go right to sleep. And every time at bedtime, they sleep through the night. We have no more problems with the sleep. So that's another killer app for quantum touch, is putting babies to sleep.
And I can testify to that firsthand. I used it with both my children to get them to sleep and all sorts. And had one lady come to a workshop who had spent thousands of pounds on sleep consultants. When she arrived at the workshop, she was in a state of exhaustion because her child had not slept for at least a year and a half. She was in exhaustion.
Yes,
she leaves the workshop. She uses quantum touch on her son, and he falls asleep just like that. 10 minutes of running energy, just like that, he's asleep. Well, all those experiences, now she's obviously a practitioner because you can't unknow what you know. Once you have seen how amazing some of these experiences are, you want to share them.
That's something that really hit me hard. Was I had seen hundreds of crazy miracles and just dumbfounding things, like somebody brings a rabbit to my house and it's hopping all over the house, and I realized I better put it back in its box because there's pellets everywhere. And when I put my hands on the rabbit, it started trembling figuring it was going to become dinner. But instead, I run energy into the rabbit, and the rabbit pushed against my hands. I thought it was trying to get away, but it flipped itself on its back and stretched out like it's sunning itself on the beach. And my girlfriend's looking at my hands are on the belly of the rabbit. It's all stretched out like this. That was one of the very first sessions I had ever given. I have seen so many things over the years that the miracles started becoming ordinary. And it's really hard to explain to new people how often you see miracles. We had a group of people practicing quantum touch on each other all the time. And they said, well, every week or two, let's bring in a new person to the group who can experience quantum touch. And they kept seeing these miracles. And they finally came to the idea that we can't keep calling them miracles if it happens every week. So they came up with a new word, and they called it normicals. That when miracles become normal, we'll just call them normicals. We don't want to discount it, but they have become normal. So this is one of the exciting things of actually learning this work, is you can start seeing things that astound you. My functional definition of a miracle is when something happens that far exceeds your expectations. That's a miracle. So if you got the impossible parking place, or if you had this pain that's been for 20 years and it suddenly disappeared, whatever the scale of it is, if it blows away your expectations, that's a miracle. And that's what quantum touch has done for me for decades and decades.
How many decades is it now?
Well, I first learned to run energy in 1978. So it's 44 years ago now. And I had seen miracles with the polarity therapy that I wrote about in my first book. Still extraordinary work. But once I learned quantum touch, the polarity was using the ambient energy, as is many other modalities. With quantum touch, we're really working to raise the vibration higher and higher to get a more immediate impact.
Which techniques do you still use the most?
Well, I think I just use quantum touch and self-created health as being my go-to things. And also I'm using what I discovered in my latest book, Hacking the Law of Attraction. That's pretty common for me to use that as well. See, what struck me was that when you have teachers like Abraham Hicks and Joe Dispenza that are teaching law of attraction, they're inadvertently, in my opinion, teaching it in a way that causes more struggle.
Why?
Well, it's like everybody says pretty much the same thing. There's a lot of variations, whether you have Vishen Lakhiani or many of the other thought leaders that are teaching this work. They say, imagine what you want, believe you have it, live as if it's true, accept the reality. Well, you know what that's called? It's called lying to yourself. You don't have the apartment, you don't have the money, you don't have the car, you don't have the job, you don't have the bikini body or the boyfriend or whatever the thing is. You don't have those things. So I'm going to fool the universe by lying and living a lie and pretending. That's called working. I'm going to make my affirmations and my pictures on a board and try to live as if a lie is true. That's doing. The law of attraction is about receiving, not doing. So I figured this out when COVID struck, because the classes were canceled all over the world. And I didn't know, how long can I go without an income before I'm going to have trouble with my mortgage payments? So I realized I had bought some really crappy stock 14 years ago in a company that never plans to go public or never release a product, like a Ponzi scheme. They just keep raising the value of their stock and selling more stock. They never have to produce anything. They just got this great little thing going. So I tried all the logical ways I could sell the stock, but nobody was going to buy it. I contacted everyone on Twitter. I contacted other companies. I could not sell the stock to save my life. So, darn it, I got to use law of attraction. So I had a different perspective immediately because I realized that there are many possible realities. There's the reality where I never sell the stock, which is pretty broad. And there's a sliver of a possible reality where I sell all my shares and I'm really happy about it. So I found the possible reality where I sold the shares. And I brought that reality closer to me. And I started sending energy to it using quantum touch. And I'm pumping the energy into this reality. And it's getting brighter and stronger. And then I got the download. It wasn't like I'm in some special space. I just got the download. It came to me instantly. And I go, oh my God, that reality has come to life. It is loving me. I don't have to manifest it. It's manifesting me. Here's the thought form about it. That Richard in that future reality is more grateful than I am. And the more grateful you are, the more real you are. See, when we're stuck in suffering and self-pity and pain and discouragement and depression, we're really suffering. But if you're in gratitude and love, you're actually closer to your higher self. You're closer to manifesting your God self. So when I'm in the illusion of suffering, I'm not manifesting the truer sense of myself. So that new me was more connected than I am. It's more real than me. So I got the download, and the download is, I'm not manifesting him. He's manifesting me. Therefore, all I have to do is relax and receive his love. So instead of I'm living, I'm doing it, I'm holding the space, no, I send him love. He comes to life. And then I kick back as if I'm in a hot tub on a cold night. You ever get in a nice hot tub on a very cold night? What do you have to do to enjoy it? Nothing. You just, That's what it's like to receive. Somebody stroking your back. That's what it's like to receive. We forget, we get so into the doing. I'm going to live as if it's true. No. That's a better description of it. So I remember him 10, 15 times a day. That's what it's like to feel that happy. That's what it's like to receive his joy. So on the third day of doing this, and I'm now just living in that energy. I'm so living that energy. Jennifer, the one who runs Quantum Touch, my business partner, she gets a letter in the mail from a stranger in New Zealand who's asking about the stock. I've never gotten a letter from anybody about that. I've had it for 14 years. We get a letter from a stranger in New Zealand asking about the stock. And I write him back and say, hey, can you help me sell it? He goes, oh, sure. Within 2.5, 3 months, I had about 3 years of income by selling some of my shares. That was the beginning. So I'm in Mexico, in Tulum, Mexico, and I got a housemaid in my apartment there. And we only had one set of keys, and the phone doesn't work very well. So sometimes I'd reach up as high as I could and I'd knock on the window to say, I'm home now. And she'd open the door. And I'm waiting for her, and there's a knock on the window. So I open up the door and look out the gate, and there's these two guys coming in the gate. And they had knocked on the window. And one stares at me and goes, what do you do? And I said, well, I've done energy healing. He said, oh, we got to talk. So I invite them in. And it turns out one of them is a producer. And I started thinking about my documentary. So I start rewriting my documentary, and I met 3 other producers while I was in Mexico, but none of them were the right one for the job. But it got me rewriting and working on my documentary. And then when I got to Hawaii, I met the right producer who made the documentary, and she had made the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? And so now I've got the right producer. But who the hell knocks on a window at 9:30 at night on a random apartment building in Mexico? The point was, I started, instead of programming for this or that reality, I started holding the space that I would be incredibly happy, that I would be in a field of miracles. So, I'm using some quantum touch technique to attract miracles. So there's many applications of this work. And as you'll discover, the more you learn, the more amazing this stuff becomes.
That's incredible. And I could listen to the stories for hours. It's what the essence of what I'm getting there, and the beauty of this is what I always say in the workshops is it's not just a healing session. Once you've got the vibration up, it doesn't just turn back down just because you've stopped the healing.
Right.
It stays. And then that becomes your set point, your energy, your vibration. And so, like you said, you meet the random person knocking on the window because you're just in that field.
Exactly right. Oh, look at this. I was just while we're talking, I'm just getting 2 messages from my producer. So she's talking anyway, she's telling me we're really close to selling it. So while we're talking, 2 messages came on my phone from my producer.
Which connects to the lack of doing, and just the more using the quantum touch as a vessel to hold that state of being, of enjoyment, rather than actually trying to fool yourself into anything.
Exactly. And the other thing is, this would change our human identity and all this and the sciences. So a couple of years ago, I got to give a presentation to a room full of scientists at the University of Arizona. Not sure exactly why they invited me, but I got invited. And what happened was they said, well, what did you learn and how did you get there? So I went through the process of this step led to this, discovering this, and then I showed them that I could align their posture without touching them. And they had 4 people measuring each person. And so I see the right hip is high. Oh yeah, it's very high. Oh yeah, it's really easy to see. And they all agreed. After about 8 or 10 minutes of measuring people, they said, there's no doubt this is real, unquestionably real. And then 4 of them said they wanted to research and publish. And then they started bragging about their special equipment, MRIs, CT scans, ultrasound. They had equipment I'd never even heard of. And they were really, and so we're going to get the best measurements in the world. This is going to be really easy to measure. It's groundbreaking. It's very exciting. And then the first one said, but if I do this, I know I'll never get tenure at the university. And then number 2, 3, and 4 said, yeah, doing this would be academic suicide. And then the head professor said, yeah, there's probably no university in the United States or Europe that's open to what you discovered. And then he compared me to Ignaz Semmelweis, Gregor Mendel, William Harvey, James Lind, Giordano Bruno, Galileo, and a host of others who couldn't be appreciated while they're alive, and said, yeah, you're probably not going to be recognized while you're alive, but good luck. So I took that frustration and rage, and voila, we have a documentary coming out. And I got 4 messages now while we're talking from Betsy saying, hey, something, so I'll get to look at them when we're done, but it's moving. The ball's moving. And this thing, we know we're going to sell it, because when she put up the sizzle reel, as they call it, the exciting little piece of the footage on her Facebook for about 3 hours before she took it down, we had about 8,000 views. So people want to know this, and it's going to be really inspiring and exciting for people to see. And I actually teach people things when I was on. So I'm actually sharing how you do it. So people won't just see it, they'll actually learn something from doing it.
When will it be out?
Well, we don't have the first episode fully edited. And once it's fully edited, I think she'll be able to sell the series. And so I'm kind of guessing February, March, April. We have to sell it to somebody first, Netflix or HBO or whoever buys it, and then it'll be out. So it's going to be a few months yet, but I'm hopeful that I'm not even hopeful we're going to sell it. We're going to sell it because people
Oh,
want, the media companies spend $340 billion a year on content. They're so hungry for something to show people. And this is actually really interesting and it's valuable. And there's a huge market of people wanting to know if this stuff is real.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
it'll sell.
Especially since COVID, there's much more of a thirst now for this kind of, this kind of knowledge to bring health.
And there's a fascination like, well, is science just limited or are we more? Is there something else beyond what the science is willing to work on? Just like the scientists at the University of Arizona, they said, yeah, it's real, but we can't touch it. Well, other people are touching it. And I'm only in the series about 4 or 5% of the time because there's all these other amazing people doing incredible work. So like we have a physician who had a near-death experience and her eyes were taped shut during surgery and she supposedly died on the table. But when she came back, she knew every single thing that happened in the hospital during the time she was brain dead. And she's not in denial about it. No, everybody knows it happened. And they interviewed the other people. It absolutely happened. Well, how do you explain that you had perfect sight and awareness of every micro detail during the surgery? Well, because the mind is not confined to the brain. How can I align somebody with energy? Because energy healing is real and consciousness is not localized.
It's fascinating. Have you ever sent healing to the past and then seen an effect?
Yeah, I wrote about it in my Quantum Touch book where I was reading an amazing book called The Continuum Concept. And it's about how these infants were so loved when they were tiny and how balanced their life became as adults. I thought, well, I didn't get held that much. So I started running energy into my imagined infant self. And what happened was about 5 seconds into running the energy, I felt a ripple go up my entire spine. And I felt like I blacked out for half a second. Huh? What the hell was that? And you can do work in your past into your future. We're not limited by time and space. By the way, this is Enzo here. He's just saying hello. So
cute.
He's a good guy. Yeah.
He looks it.
Yeah, he brought him out here to Mexico. He's a Mexican cat now. He doesn't say meow, he says meal, meal.
I hope he's settling in well.
Oh, he's pretty adjustable. He had a hard trip, but he's pretty happy now.
What we can kind of summarize this is that as we teach on the workshops, energy follows thought, and you can use this to direct it in any way you want. And that's past, present, future
It's
use.
enormous freedom for people. And it gives you abilities you didn't even know are possible. And we see miracles. Other than that, there's not much to like about it.
And you get to remember what it feels like to feel your true essence as well.
Yeah, it totally. And it taps people in on that most beautiful part of themselves. And then to be able to help other people is such a significant thing.
Can anyone do it?
Well, only the ones who want to. You have to actually want to know it. But other than that, yes, I did find that the people with postdoc graduate degrees generally have more trouble feeling their body. Like they became just this walking head of intellect, and they had a little more trouble learning it. But if they want to, they can get past that limitation and move the awareness through themselves, even if they can't feel their body. So yeah, and pretty much anybody can do it, but it's so easy. And then this, you can teach children, you can teach grandpa and great grandma. They can all learn this stuff very easily because it's so natural. It's such a basic human ability that has been cast aside because it didn't fit the cultural norms of what people think they are or can do.
That's it. I think that's one of the biggest struggles that I see with people who they want to do it, and they'll look at an instructor or another practitioner and say, oh wow, they're really good at it, but I'm struggling to have faith in my own ability. And the answer to that,
and it's so silly because
yeah,
it is such an intrinsic and natural human ability. Say, well, I'm afraid I'm going to forget how to breathe. I'm afraid I'm going to forget how my heart beats. Huh? It doesn't even make sense. But that's what the doubt and fear sounds like to us after we've seen how easy and natural it is. No. Can you feel your finger? Oh, good. Now you can learn to do it. It's that easy. If you can feel your hand or feel that your hand is there, okay, that's pretty much one of the most important skills in learning how to do it. Can you remember? Can you breathe on purpose? Yeah, I can do that. Well, okay, you have what it takes to learn to do this work.
and letting go of attachment to outcome.
Even if you don't, it's still going to work. Even if you're attached to the outcome, you still get the results because the body intelligence will. I've had times where I so doubted anything good would happen, and it still happens. It's not based on your belief. It's not a psychological mechanism. It's just the resonance and entrainment of the life force energy connecting to the other person's body and spiritual intelligence to accelerate the healing process. It's like 4 concepts right there, but that's what it is. It's using the life force energy to help another person heal faster. Karina, what a delight. This has been really easy and flowing, hasn't it?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Richard.